have to make this video going quite stuff up because it's getting way too far, and so the Nico said in community tabs. So I DM'd so we could Google up, and she said in her video it's finished, she haven't uploaded it, but here's our full DMs. But I'll be using speed paint from my outdated Foxy Boxy video. So let's get to the meats and potato. Kwite was recently called out by his exes for sexual assault and rape. But to keep in mind, Kwite's ex is a very toxic person. This ex is the one who is touching him in an appropriate manner and consently to make Kwite uncomfortable, and sending Kwite sexual messages and sending inappropriate pictures, and used Kwite for game when Kwite broke up with this individual for sexually manipulating him, using him. They made false rape allegation of his ex as a way to isolate him. So I will play the clip.
Account of that day. When we met up on February 18th, at one point, me and Orion were in a shopping center and came across a store that sold plushies. I saw one I liked that I was looking to buy for myself as a keepsake of the trip. Orion, through what I assume was trying to be polite, didn't want to let me pay for the plush and was very insistent that I let him cover the cost. In general, I like to pay for my own things when out with friends, and around this time is when YouTube was first doing well for me, so I knew I'd have money coming in not far down the line. This made me want to pay for my own things even more. When any of y'all first got a job as a kid or a new position that gave you a higher level of income for the first time, I'm sure you felt the same way. You want to use the money you feel for the first time that you've earned yourself to do things for yourself. This plush was not a shared cost. It was something I wanted to get specifically for me. I genuinely did not want Orion to pay for my stuff when I felt I could finally do so on my own. That is more than likely a pride thing, but it is how I was. I distinctly remember the cashier who was watching us bicker about it at checkout say something along the lines of, "Sometimes you just gotta let them pay for it," in a cheeky, young love kind of way. After going back and forth on it some, I directly communicated to Orion that I would be more comfortable if he let me pay for it myself, and I tried to be as direct and clear with this as possible. In response, Orion said something to the effect of, "Okay, I'll let you buy it if you give me a kiss later." This was a weirdly identical mirror to a similar situation that happened over text the day before, which I will be sharing. This time though, I didn't get to just put the phone down and not engage. I'm actively looking to buy this thing in the moment, and Orion is right in front of me. I regret agreeing to their proposal in hindsight, and maybe if I hadn't, Orion would have stopped pushing at some point, but in this somewhat awkward situation, my brain sees that as the most immediate way out of an uncomfortable spot and to pay for the item myself like I wanted. At the time, I took the comment to be lighthearted and honestly didn't think it was something that was going to get followed through on. Later that day though, Orion and I are in the driver's seat and passenger seat of his car respectively when the topic of the kiss comes up again. What I'm about to say is not a standard of consent I would have applied to anybody else back then, and it's something I've learned is also true for me and I'm deserving of as I got older. Back then though, I was a lot younger. I was 17 and had complete shit for brains. In my head, I'm thinking, fuck, that's right, I did agree to that. Since it's come up again, I'm thinking that Orion meant it seriously and I misread the situation, and that it would be shitty to now pull out of something I'd already committed to. That is not how consent works in the slightest, even on something as relatively small as a kiss, but despite my hesitance, I did kiss Orion once. That's it. That's all we ever did. Immediately after, I was feeling weird about it. I wasn't exactly enthusiastic about the event in the first place, and I didn't want to go any further with it, so we didn't. I am not trying to paint this as some instance of me being assaulted or violated, and me and Orion can both only give our personal accounts as there wasn't a camera in the car that day, but the dynamic we had regarding sex and intimate contact is significantly different than what Orion made it out to be. And my account is far more in line with not only incidents prior to the meetup, but the type of thing Orion was saying he'd do to me just the day before. Like I said, I never had sex with Orion, and the popcorn I had him apparently buy for me is something I explicitly said the day before we met up that I would buy for Orion. After asking multiple times how much I owed Orion for my movie ticket, he wouldn't let me pay him back for the cost. Again, this is literally the day before we saw each other in real life, and I was in that same mindset of wanting to pay for my own things with my own money. I responded to him, fine, then I'm buying your snacks, as that was meant as a compromise on my part. I figured if he wasn't going to budge on the tickets, I can at least do this thing to contribute, even if it was a bit uneven. needed. In my head, it was at least something. We go back and forth over text where Orion keeps trying not to let me buy even his snacks, but I'm standing my ground, and after the third time he tried to get me to not pay for it, I just stopped responding because I had already said what I planned on doing for my part. Over an hour passes by after that, and Orion is still insistent on this. He texted me a brand new proposal saying, "If you pay for snacks, I will smooch you. You don't want that now, do you?" And yeah, quite frankly, I didn't want that. This is a lighthearted text exchange, so I'm not going to send in all caps, "I do not consent" or something like that, but I try to communicate that I don't want to in a relatively playful but straightforward way. I'll pay for them and dodge your affection. And even at that point, Orion still wasn't taking no for an answer. He doubled down and said he was going to smooch me anyways. Nah, you can't dodge the smooch. It will find you and it will smooch when you least expect it. There is no dodging, only smooch. Maybe he meant that playfully, but I didn't respond to it because I was uncomfortable with the way he was talking to me. I'd said my piece on how I felt about buying the snacks as well as getting kissed, and he just kept going. I'm sure that when Orion tried to pay for my stuff, it was meant with good intentions. But in these moments, I set a clear boundary of what I preferred that he essentially said he'd only respect conditionally. This type of insistent behavior, specifically to pay for things, aren't isolated incidents. Orion even admits he has this tendency in the same testimony I shared a clip of earlier.
He drove halfway and I drove to a certain spot and we agreed to meet up. I took him around town and I paid for everything because I insisted that since I was the host, it was my job.
In regards to physical intimacy, the entire time me and Orion knew each other, I was the one most often expressing my hesitance on the matter, backing out because I got cold feet, or just outright denying to do intimate things with him. Meanwhile, Orion was always the one more forward about engaging in physical intimacy. Even if sometimes it was in a lighthearted context, Orion had a disregard for my personal choices and boundaries that I had expressed to them, often persisting beyond me showing clear discomfort and continuing to press even when I had directly declined the physical intimacy he would propose. One of the screenshots Orion used as proof of his claims is literally Orion floating and initiating the idea of us hooking up when we see each other, and my response is being unsure, then stating a reason why I wouldn't want to do it. He also cropped out the next message where he's the one to push for it even further by asking if I have condoms. You could read that as him trying to give solutions to a problem that I brought up, but I personally didn't want to continue with that discussion because I wasn't comfortable. Orion says that we had been on and off flirting and talked about how if we were both single and virgins, we would take each other's virginity. This is not something that was ever formally and fully agreed upon from my end, and much less as something we do at some specific place or time. The virginity thing was first mentioned over half a year earlier in August 2017, where Orion was the one to originally propose the idea in a voice call, and I was the one who wanted to think on it further. While I don't have a recording of that call for the exact wording, Orion specified that a heart message he sent was platonic, and in response, I joked that it didn't seem very platonic, just straight up gay. That's because we weren't talking about just cuddling or something in that vein. He had proposed explicitly having intercourse, and I was the one still unsure about it. The reason I was in Florida was never to hook up with Orion. I was vacationing with my family. Orion was always aware of this, and I only planned to see Orion in Orlando because he was someone I knew who lived in the area. Another time, on December 26, 2017, after a voice call and small message exchange, Orion asked me to come down south, and at the time, I straight up said no. Where Orion then jumps to the reason for this being, "Oh yeah, your penis no working," essentially assuming the reason I wouldn't come down was specifically because of not being able to do sexual things, when I'm not the one who has ever been shown to be the person most concerned about doing that. My penis not working, meaning my performance issues, are another thing that I'll get into shortly, but even though at the time I probably meant my response lightheartedly, as when it happened, I did see this conversation as just jibbing with a friend. When I said, "This is why I don't hang out with you," it still has a pretty clear undertone on how I felt about the situation. Another time, on October 28th, 2017, Orion tried calling me, and when I didn't pick up, he said this: "I know you're online, fuck you. If you don't pick up, I'm gonna fuck you. I'm pretty explicit when I say in response, don't fuck me, and then I'm busy. Busy being an e-thought, okay? I will fuck you. You didn't pick up, I don't make the rules." I didn't have a strong reaction back then as it seemed pretty lighthearted, but also because this was how Orion would joke towards me being busy or denying them things fairly regularly. When I said no to having Orion on a podcast I had, he said he'd suck me off if I did. When he asked me for a Discord rank and I said no, Orion said they'd fuck my ass. And on the rare occasion you do see me reciprocate a sexual advance, like the Skype log where I tell him, "You have to draw porn," and Orion says, "I will," it is still a topic that Orion was the first to bring up the idea of, had initiated by sending me explicit pictures he had drawn himself, and well after the last time I had said anything concerning the topic, Orion would continue to mention as something he was willing to do. All this still being something only happening over the internet, where it required no actual physical contact on my part, making my anxiety around it much more manageable. Orion claimed that we are both ex-friends and partners who had been in an on and off relationship from sometime in 2017 till February 2018. The screenshot Orion showed note of him asking who he could tell about us dating, where I respond that I prefer to keep it to mutual friends, but I ultimately trust his judgment with whoever. That was said in the only period of time we have both agreed on the term dating, a period of time that lasted less than 2 days. What Orion never showed was that at the end of that conversation those lines were cherry-picked from, there was an abrupt tone shift where the conversation switched from something two people freshly in a new relationship might say to each other to something more like strangers making small talk for the first time. This is because the night before, barely a day into us being together, I broke it off. The relationship started because I told Orion I had a crush on him after meeting up for the first time in June 2017. But I was also the one who just as quickly broke it off. I don't have a recording of this phone call saved, but all the reasoning I stated in the call was explicitly mentioned and discussed in that text conversation where we spoke with each other more like coworkers than good friends or partners. It confirms that I was the one who ended it because I was scared I'd made the wrong and a rash decision and had only gone to Orion as a rebound. I was coming off the back of a very bad breakup with an ex-boyfriend who started dating another friend of ours just a day or two after saying me and him should call it quits. And while that technically didn't overlap with the time we were together, it felt like my ex had cheated on me twice within 4 months at that point. And while I'm older and mostly over it now, it hurt a lot at the time. It was just a week after that breakup that I saw Orion and this whole relationship dialogue happened and then ended. While in this instance, it was me who admitted having feelings for and wanting to become closer in a romantic way with Orion, at no point did we ever do anything sexually intimate outside of sending flirtatious messages within that time frame and outside of it. And it was also me who called off taking our friendship to that next level of intimacy because I was again the one getting cold feet from my nerves around the situation. My apprehension when it comes to sexual contact is not limited to Orion. Not only did I never have sex with him, I have never had sex with anyone. Even as of recording this video, I am still a virgin. It has been a long-running insecurity of mine. Due to my general focus on work, the pandemic killing the ability to pursue anything in that vein for years, as well as causing me to backslide in my social ability and confidence like it did most people, a fair few of my friends have had to deal with me drunkenly venting about my nervousness around it. And it's something I have had casual discussions with my friends about nearly a year and a half after Orion claimed I had raped him. The part in those DMs where I mentioned me getting my penis sucked one time was in reference to summer 2018, right after my senior year ended. I was talking to a girl I was friends with from my school who had thrown a graduation party where we ended up making out. One of the nights after, I ended up at their place again and I got fellatio from them. I told my friend Ethan that we didn't go any farther because I didn't have condoms on me, but what I didn't mention was that I had her stop the oral early because I couldn't feel it or get my penis entirely hard. I can masturbate on my own just fine, but when it comes time to do the deed with someone else, my nerves have stopped me from being able to perform because I have incredibly bad sexual anxiety when it comes to the actual physical act. It's to the point where every time I've been in a real life sexual situation, it has caused me to be the one to back out of them before it can ever fully progress to intercourse. One person I did mention this insecurity to was Orion, who in late 2017 I vented to about an earlier incident where a boyfriend I had at the time was giving me a hand job and I just could not get it up all the way or finish. I was already an insecure teenage virgin and I was stupidly embarrassed about having these performance issues. So I essentially begged Orion not to share what I confided in him. Me and that boyfriend tried more than once and never figured it out, and my unsuccessful attempts to get it up persisted until just 3 months before the alleged rape, at which point me and my then boyfriend had broken up, so I was not doing it with anyone at all. That is a major issue I would have had to figure out very quickly in the time between those messages and February when Orion says the assault happened. Further showing he knew about this still persistent issue and insecurity of mine, you might remember a message I showed earlier where he poked fun at me for my dick not working in regards to me not wanting to meet up with Orion down south. The cold feet I get with sexual contact is something I've had another stunted interaction because of as recently as February of this year. The last day I was in Brighton in early February, I was making out with a guy who I got on with in a club named Club Revenge. But I chickened out of doing more and left the club early because I was nervous and I had a flight home in the morning. It was to the point where he even offered to come over just to keep me company because of how anxious I ended up getting in the club. This has been a continuous issue, not just with getting it up, but engaging in sex in general that has made me incredibly anxious to go all the way with anybody at all. These examples might seem sparse, but there are so few because they are genuinely the only times I have ever been in a situation close to actual sexual intimacy, with me failing to follow through every time. Part of this anxiety stems from me having also been sexually assaulted in the past, both before the time Orion alleges I assaulted them and after. Once by a coworker over twice my age when I was 17 and working an awful fast food job, and the other was in a club when I was 19 by someone who thought I was more into them than I was, but didn't bother to check before putting their hands on me. Pain is not meant to be compared, but I do know what it's like to have your agency taken from you and to feel helpless to do anything about it. Being told, oh over and over again I did the worst version of that to somebody else when I know what it feels like from experience has been soul-crushing. In his twit longer, Orion says that when several months passed after the falling out, that he tried to come out about the alleged emotional abuse he suffered, but that he received harassment and calls to his house telling him to kill himself for it, which only worsened his mental state. This is in reference to a video I've used several clips of so far while making my arguments that was uploaded by a YouTuber named Tuskspicious and at the time of the upload went by Oceanus. If Orion was harassed and threatened for being in that video, I completely and harshly condemn those actions, and Orion should never have been put through that. If people out there did those things, they should be ashamed of themselves and know they have no safe harbor in my community. I have never and would never instigate or support this kind of behavior. That video is something I have never acknowledged publicly until now. This is because I viewed the video then and still do now as an attempt to put my reputation into question by saying anything that its creator could think of. Whether it was based on shaky evidence or even no evidence at all, it didn't matter. It was designed to get a reaction out of me. That video was called Giving Kwite the Axe, and Tusk explicitly said in the video it was made with the goal of destroying my career.
This species is called a kwite. He is often located in a bland setting and can be seen wielding an item whilst recording. It's time to give the axe to his career.
In it, Orion gave a spoken testimony about their timeline of knowing me and the apparent emotional abuse I did to them. That testimony was the only thing he gave to support his claims back then, much like the current allegations. Both times, Orion said a whole lot and gave next to nothing, or literally nothing in this video's case, to substantiate any part of his claims. The video is littered with falsehoods, outright lies, and contradictions of Orion's current version of events. For example, the clip I showed at the start of the video, where when discussing the day we met up and watched Black Panther, Orion described two completely different versions of events, both tonally and even how he felt about the event after the fact.
It was fun, and I distinctly remember him getting out of my car, but stopping midway and saying, "Just remember, I really care about you."
What was completely missing from that video was any mention of sexual contact at all. I don't mean just sexual misconduct, I mean any account of us having any physical intimacy at any point. What Orion did do was publicly out my struggles with self-harm.
I wasn't his best friend, but I was one of his closest. I helped him through self-harm, which I'm still susceptible to.
This is something that I have never at any point before that video was uploaded all the way till now ever spoken publicly about or ever intended to. It is one of my deepest and most personal struggles that Orion was willing to expose to the public without a care just because it became useful as a tool to hurt me with. And it feels like, considering what he says later, to hold over my head that he knew about. Throughout the video, Orion continuously drives home how good of friends we used to be before saying how many secrets he had on me.
So after he didn't respond to Discord messages, I texted him on his phone because I had his phone number, as well as I'd met his parents, I had his address. I have a lot of secrets on him because we were best friends.
This video came off as malicious to me when it was first released and still does now. Considering the private issues of mine Orion was willing to share about me in public, I feel like nothing, even just a passing comment, would have been off the table. And yet any mention of sexual contact is completely absent in any form from his previous testimony. In that testimony, from the jump, Orion gets the timeline of events objectively wrong. In the video, Orion says we met in early 2016.
I met Kwite early 2016, around about January, because it was around about my birthday.
This is instead of early 2017, like he says now, and all records point to the latter being the case. This directly puts the timeline he gave back then off by a year. You could excuse Orion as having misspoken, but it's a mistake he makes every time he mentions what year something happened in.
But then we started to get really, really close. Especially around about summer of 2016, we met up in my home city.
When that actually happened was in summer 2017. Orion's current version of events agrees with me that we had first met both online and in real life in 2017.
Cut to planning to VidCon. We met up in February of 2017. Cut to February where we met up for the second time, and I remember it was February because we went to see Black Panther.
Orion implied Black Panther came out in 2017. He says cut to February 2 separate times, but only mentions what year it was once. He either means that I met up with him only the one time in February 2017, which was when we would have watched Black Panther, and is objectively untrue. Or he added an entirely new instance of us meeting up, which puts an extra year on the timeline of our friendship. Either way it was meant, his timeline of these alleged events would be objectively wrong and at odds with his current version of the allegation. allegations. If you think I'm nitpicking with the years, this isn't an issue exclusive to raw dates, but spans of time as well. In the video, Orion says I started ignoring him for 2 weeks after seeing Black Panther.
2 weeks later, he randomly starts ignoring me.
In his current version of events, Orion said that several months had passed after Black Panther before I cut him off. The reality is closer to Orion's original testimony, but both are still wrong. The call where we fell out happened on March 20th and was almost a month to the day after we had last met up on February 18th. My contact with Orion had petered off into almost nothing only a week before, but we did still occasionally message. In the period of absolute silence where I didn't speak to Orion through text, call, or otherwise at all was only 3 days long. Orion also claimed I called him out of nowhere.
In the middle of a call with one of my dear friends, The Right Opinion, I get a call from him. And I think, oh, finally he's made some time. He's not busy anymore.
When in reality, I was returning the single call Orion had given me over those 3 days only 2 hours after he had originally sent it. Towards the end of his testimony, Orion had this to say about what he did after our March 2018 call.
I texted DM'd a shared friend of ours, asking if, just because Kwite doesn't like me right now, if we could still be friends. Obviously, Kwite had talked to him because he then sent me a 5+ paragraph note about how disgusting and selfish I was. He told me a lot of the things that Kwite had told me.
Tusk shows the screenshots of this at the end of the video where it's revealed the friend of ours was Kappa Kaiju, who it sucks I have to name in this, but I don't feel I could properly make this point without doing so. Orion said that Kappa's opinion was a result of Kwite having talked to him already.
Obviously, Kwite had talked to him because...
And I had spoken to him first, but the nature of that discussion and what Orion did to prompt it is very important. In that March call, I was giving Orion, to the best of my ability, a level-headed explanation of why I wanted to cut them off. He was codependent, he was a drain on me emotionally and mentally, and he had long gotten in the way of A, my efforts to take care of my own mental health, and B, live my life. Orion told me that he apparently noticed I'd been withdrawing from my older friend group overall in favor of new people. At the time, I could see there being some truth to this. I was hanging with some new people more, others less, but I was still in contact with plenty of folks I'd known for years in that community, a whole lot of whom I still talk to today. It was nothing actively malicious, but I could at least understand it from his perspective. But then he says that the mutual friend, Kappa, had agreed with him that they see this happening too. That was the first I'd ever heard of that. If it was true, if multiple of my friends are noticing this about me, it's like, whoa, am I the problem? So I asked. It turns out Kappa never said that. At the very least, not in the way Orion presented it to me. When Orion messaged Kappa about it, he specifically led with, hey, do you actually like me, like as a friend? Because Kwite backstabbed me. I want to make sure we're still friends. And Kappa, who I feel was understandably not happy having his name and word used to try and back me into a corner, didn't respond lightly. He shared his actual outside perspective of me and Orion's relationship, and if you read the whole thing, agreed with basically all my reasoning for removing Orion from my life, and also behavior that lines up with what you can see going through all of our message logs. For the most part, the rest of the video I haven't covered is Orion's claims I was emotionally abusive and would verbally batter him, while giving vague examples of what he claims I said with no solid proof to corroborate any of it. I'm not sure the reasoning for this part, but the history of this video's availability and publication status is notable as well. The original title in 2018 was Giving Kwite the Axe, Terms of Service Breach and More. And then at some point in the last few years between then and now, it got unlisted. That is until recently, when these new round of allegations came out, where Tusk republished the video with a new title, Giving Kwite the Axe, Transphobia and More. A notable thing to do, considering that since this video was old and made no mention of the alleged transphobia back then, it was a misrepresentation of what was in that video. Around the time he republished it, Tusk made a tweet with a video attached, a video I didn't manage to archive, unfortunately. But at least in the tweet caption, he promoted his newly titled and republished video, saying in it that he and Orion had talked about what Kwite had done in the past all the way back in 2019. Except they didn't. That video was made in September 2018. I can only make excuses for these two misspeaking so many times. In regards to everything around the original attempt to give the axe to my career, Tusk and Orion failed to get correct even the most objectively provable parts. What was interesting is Ethan deleted that tweet soon after making it at the apparent request of Orion. Not long after this, the YouTube video itself went unlisted again for a short period after after that tweet got made. You can see it unlisted here with the new title and all, before it was finally republished a third time, where as of writing this you can still view it. If anything changes though, it will be archived with all Orion and I's message logs in the description. Orion's pushiness was also not a dynamic unique to sexual situations. Orion would often push the limits of my other explicit personal boundaries if he wanted something that crossed them. And there were times I'd eventually cave after he repeatedly asked me for it, even if I was overall uncomfortable with the request. As a lot of the time, saying no hadn't been enough up until then, and giving in would get him to stop with minimal conflict and without me having to try and explain in detail why specific things make me uncomfortable. For example, Orion said this in their twitlonger. Kwite had a rule that I wasn't allowed to take any pictures of him, but he was allowed to take pictures of me. After promising and begging to take a few pictures that wouldn't and still haven't been posted for memories, he let me take a few before he left. Then later Orion says, I have a video with him to prove we were together at the time that I was able to post only for myself after begging him to take pictures with me because we were friends. Firstly, there was never some rule set up like that, and I didn't take pictures of Orion on that trip. Even if I had, their face was in the public and was something he had willingly shared before I ever would have taken these hypothetical pictures. How this section reads to me is that I had set a hard boundary of not taking pictures of my face. This was because that even back then, I was a faceless creator hoping to maintain that anonymity and had anxiety around any of my personal details getting shared with the public, whether that was through someone leaking them or an account someone used being compromised. But instead of respecting my set, stated, and acknowledged boundaries, Orion kept pushing, saying stuff like we're friends and that I could trust them with those pictures because of that. That's behavior he admits doing on multiple occasions. I agreed to do something I was generally not okay with to try and accommodate something Orion wanted because it seemed important to them. And the part where they said they still haven't posted those pictures anywhere is a lie. Not only did Orion obviously post the pictures of my face because of this current situation, but he also shared them around to people I didn't know at least around or before September 2018, as well as sharing other photos of me that I had taken of myself and only shared with a select group of people. Orion might not have posted them publicly until now, but I think taking pictures of my face that he assured me I could trust him with and sharing those pictures with people I don't know is a breach of that trust. And the way he has now used those pictures to dox me and make these kind of false accusations has proved that my initial fears were correct. Going back to boundaries over physical actions, on Skype around April 2017, Orion said he wished he could hug me when I was going.
What Kite said was true. He was indeed framed by his ex. So I'll play the full clip by Bored Oranges.
It's called pattern recognition. Surprising, I know. Ignoring pattern recognition for a second, YouTube drama. The worst thing about YouTube drama is easily the amount of people that know about it and try to weigh in on it no matter how uneducated their opinions are. Something more I can say he's grown out of is reading something and then immediately regurgitating it like a fact. Because not only does it not help anyone, but it also completely poisons the well of information being spread. You also look really stupid when people find out that you are wrong. We've seen this happen multiple times throughout the years, and every time it manages to get that much goofier with the amount of lies, misinformation, and half-truths being spread. And I'm not even talking about the random NPCs dropping takes on Twitter with 0 likes. I'm talking about content creators too. Here's a little surprise to all the people who watch my YouTube videos. You shouldn't trust every word said by famous people, because not only are most famous people lacking brain cells, but most famous people just lie. The concept of pattern recognition seems to be a dwindling concept, however, because the exact same thing happened 3 times in the past 7 years. Slazo, Pyrocynical, and Kwite have all had allegations levied at them that were either later to be exposed as untrue in some way. With Pyro, it was the idea that he knowingly groomed a child. Slazo was apparently an abusive partner, and Kwite, well, out of everyone, his controversy made the least amount of sense to me. But I should probably start at the beginning, shouldn't I? Hey, if you watch a lot of my videos, then you know the drill by now. I want more money and the ability to flex how many people have pressed the funny red button, so subscribe. Consider joining the Discord if you want to hear me talk out of my £2 microphone in people's VCs. And follow my Twitter for some base tweets. I also have a second channel where I promise I'll be posting content too soon. Anyway, time to get on with it.
Oh my god, I don't. Hey!
Kwite is a YouTuber with almost 2 million subscribers on YouTube. He makes commentary videos on mostly non-serious topics. Even someone as soulless as me can see the appeal. Anyway, blah blah blah, speech about how this YouTuber's career fell apart. On the 22nd of February, a Twitter user called Nias Putin posted a twitlonger on Kwite, accusing him of being emotionally manipulative. accusing him of being manipulative, a cloud chaser, using him. He also makes claims to be the originator of Kwite's avatar, accused Kwite of being transphobic, and the most important claim. Orion claimed, the name of the person that made the tweet longer is Orion, by the way. Orion claimed that Kwite had sexually assaulted them. Hello, I never thought that I could come out about this, and I have struggled with this for years before writing this. And I doubt it will be anything close to years after I write this that this will ever be released. But in the case that you are reading this, I have to come out and lay out what has happened to me. I was by a man known as the YouTuber Kwite in February 2018. Been in an extremely toxic friendship, on and off relationship with him since 2017. To start in the beginning, I had found Kwite's channel when it had less than 500 subscribers, and as a teenager wanted to make art for him. Because he didn't use his face in his videos, I thought he would have an easier time if I drew him, and recommended he wore sunglasses and a face mask instead of manually keying his face out with a black box. There I essentially came up with a persona with him and drew various talk sprites for him, for free, that he only ever used maybe once. We were around the same age and slowly began talking and bonding over shared mental health issues. At this time I was undiagnosed with autism and BPD, and thus was unaware of how these would affect me in the coming relationship we had, and how he would, most likely without knowing, take advantage of me. At first we were extremely close in ways that helped to both of us. He shared bits of his past and I shared mine. However, slowly my status as an artist would land me in more YouTuber circles than his, and he would slowly try to encourage me to let him join said spaces. As a friend, I of course wanted to include him in as many as I could, but as I did, and he made various connections outside of me, the relationship grew transactional. While I won't say I was the most stable person at the time, I was not actively unkind. I cannot say the same for him. When my abandonment issues would arise, he would leave me ignored, and then when I was having the worst of my time, he would swoop in to save me and keep me under his thumb. He would yell at me or act passive aggressive towards me when being my friend was inconvenient, but love bomb me when it was just us or he needed something from me. He would use my memory issues against me to gaslight me about things he said, and would keep most of the conversations we had on calls or on Skype, because the messages delete after a set amount of time. He would actively talk about his new friends to me when he wanted me to do something for him, and took up a great amount of my time. Eventually we met in real life a few times. I had transphobic parents, so I told him my dead name to use only when my parents were talking to him, but after knowing this information, he would use it as a way to belittle me. The first meeting was fine, but he had a rule that I wasn't allowed to take any pictures of him, but he was allowed to take pictures of me. After promising and begging to take a few pictures that wouldn't and still haven't been posted for memories, he let me take a few before he left. The second meeting, however, was different. We had planned to meet up while he was on vacation in my city, and thus I would pick him up in my car, and we would both go to a trampoline park and go see Black Panther. This is where the worst of his behavior occurred. At this time, we were both on and off flirting and had discussed that if we were both single at the time, we would take each other's. However, once he had come onto me in the back seat of my car, I started to get cold feet. He, however, did not want to take no for an answer. In the back seat of my own car, he raped me. All the while I was telling him how it hurt and how I didn't want to do this anymore. He kept telling me this is what you wanted as he went, but soon got bored of it and got out. I sat in the car by myself for a bit before going to join him in the movie we had planned to see together. And to make up, he had me buy him popcorn. I put the event out of my mind as just two being bad at and hung out with him for the rest of the day. He was still one of my closest friends. I have a video with him to prove that we were together at the time, that I was able to post only for myself after begging him to take pictures with me because we were friends. A few months later, once he has gained quite a few more subscribers and larger YouTube friends, did he start ghosting me more and more often. All while I was having BPD episodes. It got to the point where he called me to cut me off, and in our fight he called me up, who thinks she's a boy and never will be. This extremely hurt me and caused me to spiral more. I almost needed to be institutionalized, but thankfully for my social support system, I wasn't. I'm truly sorry that I stayed silent on this issue for years, but I cannot keep silent. I have been scared for myself and how the public will treat me, but I am too scared that I am not the only victim to keep silent anymore. Anyone who may also have been victimized is more than encouraged to DM me, and I hope you're doing okay. I know that many of you will not believe me. I don't care anymore. For those who do, thank you for your ear, and I hope that you stay safe. Needless to say, the the floodgates were open. Mentions of dead naming, slurs, and transphobia. Anyone is a fan of Kwite after reading this? Block me. Right now. This is fucking disgusting. And no one should be supported after doing this. Hashtag drop Kwite. Hashtag I stand with Orion. At Kwite Mods has already gone private. Fuck y'all too. Hashtag drop Kwite. Hashtag I stand with Onision. Hashtag believe victims. Man, as a trans person, it's so difficult to see people you look up to just end up as another transphobic arse. Or no less. My fault for trusting another disgusting YouTuber. Hashtag drop Kwite. Hashtag I stand with Orion. Hashtag drop Kwite. Hashtag I stand with Orion. I swear to God, I'm starting to lose hope in YouTubers day by day. Man, hindsight is a bitch. Something I noticed about all of those tweets though is that they were made mere hours after Orion's original tweet longer, the one that provided literally no evidence for any of the claims he made. Now, I'm not saying providing evidence of a sexual assault is easy, because it's not, obviously, but what about everything else? You're telling me you can't provide evidence for the stuff you said in DMs or during a call? Also, sorry to mess with the pace of this video, but can I talk about this for a second? What literal brain damage? The amount of bias towards the whole believe all victims movement is pretty obvious, with the diagram painting the concept of believing a fake victim as doing the best to support a potential victim, when in reality you might have just helped ruin someone else's entire life, and then painting the idea of not believing a fake victim as something that would screw over the victims when that isn't the case. Where do I stand? Be neutral until both sides make a response. I thought that was obvious. In a situation like this, with so little evidence for anything, it only makes sense to wait for Kwite's response, because he was cooking up something fierce. While Kwite's in the kitchen, I want to look a lot more into the victim. Let's talk about Orion. On the 19th of March, a YouTuber called King Coda released a doc and video on Orion, exposing a lot of things people didn't realize or just didn't care about. The main point I'll be focusing on is how Orion has a lying problem. At one point, Orion claimed to be a victim of pyro. Okay then, proof pending I guess. He also then claims that the entirety of the Slazo drama was I think I'll just read this one out. Just between you and me real quick. Off the books, no one knows. Slazo did that shit. Quite made up shit to back up Che, but like, for real. Pyro 2. What did bro mean by that? Now, I know I cannot prove this of the current evidence we have, but I think he did this to throw out the two outliers that would make people be skeptical of his claims, which, you know, isn't good if it's true. But things that really stood out to me in this document was Orion's proof, such as being in a relationship with Kwite and having pictures, which proves nothing relevant. Apparently, Orion had access to a voicemail with Kwite being transphobic. He doesn't provide any of this, even though so far, the most evidence we have gotten out of him in this situation is a comically placed tumbleweed. Oh, by the way, Kwite's face was leaked during all of this. Orion was honestly using Kwite's face as proof for sexual. You fucking what, mate? Hey, long time no talk. This is Orion from back in the day. I have something you may want to know. I was by one of your friends. If you can promise not to tell him I told you, I can tell you no, it was with receipts. Was that English? No. Quite me. I have proof. Have you seen his face? Now, doxing the face of a person who sexually assaulted you arguably is fair. Like, I wouldn't do it personally, but I understand why someone else would. Unfortunately, the allegations aren't true. Surprise! Woo!
In my conclusion, Orion framed Kite and always said that just to make Kite look bad. And Orion can't get over the breakup, so Kai did the right thing by breaking up with him. So, remember kids, do not believe false rape allegation. If you see rape allegation, just wait till the second party says it's true or not. So yeah, bye.